This program is being provided by the 15 members of the Vancouver Educational Telecommunications Consortium, TV, etc.
So I'll just begin again. My name is Chris. I'm from the Clark County Juvenile Court. I was a probation counselor for about 10 years, and I'm now up in kind of program coordinator stuff on the other side of the building. So today I'm here to share with you just some kind of common tips. As a probation counselor, I worked with kids and parents, obviously, for a long time, and worked through problems and tried to motivate change and encourage kids to stay on the right path. And through that experience, we received a lot of training as probation counselors around strength-based approach, motivational interviewing, and then our court also adheres to the philosophies of restorative justice. And all of that has to do with just encouraging kids to stay on the right path. So in my experience with that, I had to learn kind of tricks of the trade in communicating with teenagers and motivating them to make changes. So I'm going to start first with a kind of a bullet point. I created this actually as a probation counselor to remind myself, because sometimes you get caught up in what's going on and you kind of aren't at your best all the time. So I would review this from time to time to remind myself on what I was intending to do and why I was doing what I was doing. So I'll pass this around. Start somewhere here. Yeah. So I'll just clarify too that this isn't all encompassing, but it was things that I just found helpful in working with parents. I realized quickly that the biggest influence in kids' lives are their parents, and that if I wanted to help everybody get healthy, I needed to partner with the parents. So we would spend a lot of time problem solving and exploring what was going on with their youth and how we could just get everybody in a place where they could communicate with each other, and then through that process, make some positive changes. So the first and foremost, especially in the line of work that I was in, often the kids and the parents had been through a lot already, and they were in such conflict that the communication had just really kind of broken down. So we would spend a lot of time learning how to reestablish kind of the rules of the game, and helping everybody move forward where they trusted each other again and could actually really hear each other, because that would be the hard part. Everybody had great points, everybody was really invested in what they were feeling, but they just weren't hearing each other, so it would just go round and round and round. The first thing we would work on is making sure that the expectations and the boundaries were clear and consistent. Often they were clear. The kid could tell you, my mom and dad want me to do this. But when you got into the consistency part of it, it would kind of break down. And to do with frustration, to do with the fact that teenagers are very, very good at figuring out how to work around things and break you down. So that was a big thing, was if they figured out that they could get to you, they would. So we would work on that. And that had to do, obviously, with giving into pressure. When you're trying to change the behavior, or if you've had a pattern that has existed for some time within the family, and then you try to change it, they're going to react, wait a minute, you can't change the rules of the game. And sometimes they would actually, they would increase the pressure because they want you to get you back to where you were. So you have to I used to tell parents, buckle your seatbelts, this is going to be a rough ride, but we'll come out the other side and things will work. You just got to stick with it. A lot of problem solving during that time. The other thing that would come up a lot had to do with consequences and rewards, mostly to do with consequences. There can be situations where you're so frustrated and you just keep taking privileges and you keep consequenting, and pretty soon the kid's grounded for a month, they can't ever leave the house, and they've given up. And so then they just don't even try. They're just over it, and they're sneaking out, they're leaving, they don't care, grounded for another month, they're gonna be gone anyway. So we would work on trying to find ways for the kid to succeed, some small attainable goals that they can work towards. Otherwise they lose their motivation. And if you stop and think about that makes sense. But when you're so frustrated and you want to rein them in, you just keep thinking, okay, if I keep taking that away and take this way, pretty soon they're gonna get it. Well, no. Pretty soon they just say, forget you, and they run out and they're out on the streets doing their thing. So we worked on that, and you can do little things. You can still kind of, and I think I mentioned this later, the one thing we would work on about the non-negotiables, the rules of the family that you're not going to flex on, we would try to ask, we try to keep that in the safety realm. As the parent, you can say to them, my job is to keep you safe, and these rules we're not going to negotiate on. The other stuff is where you have to learn to live kind of in the gray area, I call it. Because like you heard downstairs, the kids were talking about how they want to feel like you're listening to them, that you're not nagging them, and that you want to do what they want to do. And I thought that was an interesting statement, because oftentimes that doesn't mean I want you to let me stay out all night, but they want to have a say in what's going on, especially when they hit that teen years. They're starting to kind of move out on their own. They're starting to just kind of figure out who they are. They've got all these other pressures coming on, and you want to build the skills where they're able to problem solve for themselves and figure out who they are and what they want people to know about them, or the world, how the world's going to view them. So you do kind of try to look for those opportunities of where they can have some say. It's a negotiable thing, not giving them their way, more of a compromise type thing. And a lot, sorry, let's slow down. I lost my train. Okay, so that was the other thing about working in the gray area, is you're also looking for learning opportunities for them. You want them to start to understand the power that they do have, and they have the power to make decisions that can really, really harm them, but they also have the power to make decisions that can help them be successful. And you want to create situations where they're looking out for themselves, that they're understanding that they are important and what their friends think. Sometimes they have to make those decisions where they're going against what their friends want them to do. And in order for them to feel confident in doing that, they have to believe in themselves. And that was mentioned downstairs as well, as having that strong self-esteem. And a lot of times that comes from them just learning how to do it. So in your conversations with them, you're encouraging them, you're wanting to know what is their opinion, what do they think would resolve the problem. And sometimes they'll say, I don't know, or sometimes they'll throw out an idea that you know as an adult isn't going to work from your life experience. But then you just kind of help them explore, maybe make some suggestions or make a few little points, but avoid telling them all the time, because they don't listen after a while. So that kind of covers boundaries and expectations. And I'm going to go into a little bit more on how to talk with them when we cover the motivational interviewing sheet. So let me jump down to communication. Does anybody have any questions about the boundaries and expectations piece of this yet? Okay, we'll jump forward. When we're talking with teens, especially when you're trying to problem solve with them, or you are trying to impart to them something about a family rule or an expectation, it's very easy to fall into kind of lecturing and just telling them what you want or what you think they're doing. One of the rules that I tried to live by when I worked with kids on a regular basis was listen more than I talked. I really needed to hear where they were coming from, to understand what was motivating them. Why did they want to do what they were doing? What influences were going on in their lives? What stressors they had? So if I talked more, then I wasn't going to hear it. And a lot of times we feel like we know what's going on, so we start addressing the problem with them, and it's not, excuse me, it's not even what's going on for them. You look for opportunities for what they're interested in. Sorry. For example, like the basketball, they were talking downstairs. One of the kids loved basketball. Somebody else expressed interest in board games, things like that. You want to look for opportunities to just talk with them about what interests them, because a lot of times you're going to hear other things will come into that conversation. And as they relax and they get to talk about themselves, you're going to hear more other kind of outside things that you can then seize the opportunity to further that conversation or develop it. Obviously, don't lecture for too long. I fell into that trap sometimes as a probation counselor. You see the glaze over look start, and I would just stop and then redirect and ask an open-ended question to get them back engaged in the conversation. The other one I liked a lot and was a great strategy was to be on the move, go on walks. Sometimes when you got them in the car, it's kind of they can't get out, so they have to chat with you. I used to find a lot of times we'd sit down with kids and talk, but if you can kind of get them up and out and moving where they don't have to look directly at you and they can kind of be physical while they're communicating with you, they just relax a lot more and you can have more in-depth conversations with them. We use that a lot at the juvenile court with our restorative community service projects. We have mentors on site, and that's one of the big intents behind that is that the mentors are working alongside them and there's opportunities for conversations during the activity. So look for ways to do that, and with the weather, if it gets better, we'll do some hikes. Let me pass out, this is the other big tool that we use at the juvenile court, and we've had lots of trainings around this, but it's not, you don't need too much training for this. It's a technique that we use called motivational interviewing. In this form, what I like about it is it's got just kind of a list of techniques that you can use while you're working with kids. The goal of motivational interviewing is to really create it's a technique you use to create rapport with youth, or any person actually, when you're wanting to talk with them about their behavior and you're wanting to encourage them to make some changes. So it's not sitting down and saying, this is what I want you to do and this is how I want you to do it. It's more about helping them explore the behavior themselves and creating doubt for them. Obviously, if it's a problem behavior, that's what we're talking about. A lot of this actually originated in drug and alcohol treatment settings, but we found it's very effective with any type of behavior that you want to help someone change. It's negative behavior, skipping school, staying out late, getting in trouble, things like that. And basically, the biggest tool in it is they call it the decisional balance. It's a cost-benefit analysis where you're helping the person explore the behavior and what are the costs to them around that behavior and what are the benefits to them around that behavior. And obviously, if it's a behavior that's negative, you're going to have more costs than you are benefit. So you help them explore that. How is this affecting you? What about this is making things good in your life? What about this is making things bad in your life? And you just really are helping them explore it and understand it. And sometimes the first time you do it, which I've had happen quite a bit, everything's good about it, getting high, it's great, it makes me feel good. They'll actually just sit there and tell you, there's nothing bad about this. And that's okay, don't freak out when they do that, because what you're experiencing right there with them is the fear of letting it go. So you need to explore that with them. And you start asking some open-ended questions about, you can point out, well, you're heading to detention right now because you had a dirty UA. I'm using some of the professional stuff, but you're grounded, whatever. You're suspended from school. How's that working out for you? That's one of the phrases I use quite a bit. And you can slowly, through this process of encouraging them to understand or to analyze it, you're trying to just decrease the resistance to the change. And part of that is overcoming the fears, understanding those fears, and supporting them in addressing those fears. And usually, the fear that they're going to express, there is a solution to that, and you just need to find out for them what they're comfortable with. And it's little incremental changes, and they just need help problem solving that. Sometimes it's changing friends, sometimes it's engaging in new activities, and things like that. The realistic strategies, it's important because you're looking at creating a situation where it's their choice, where they're choosing to start making these changes, and then you just support them through that process. So some of the strategies you use, obviously I mentioned earlier, open-ended questions. You want them to, I use a lot like, tell me more about that, or I just heard you say that you're worried about that. Talk to me about that worry. What happens in your mind when you're feeling worried about that? And that helps kind of pull out really what they're internalizing and they're either talking to their friends about or talking to themselves about. So you get really curious and ask, the open-ended questions gets less, you don't want a yes, no answer. If you're getting yes, no answers, it's not open-ended. You ask, don't tell. And that's the part I was saying too about you want to spend more time listening than you do talking. So the idea is that you ask one question and then they answer with, 10 sentences. And so you just keep exploring and kind of casting about to hear more about what they're stressing about or what they're struggling with. The reflective listening is another great technique in that you're checking in with the kids. So if they're telling you that they're very angry about getting kicked out of school, and then they're saying, the principal did this to me and just is picking on me or targeting me, then you kind of can flip that back when you're talking and say, so what I hear you saying is you're feeling like the principal isn't understanding you, isn't listening to you. And you kind of reframe, and sometimes they don't even realize that that's what they were saying. And if you're wrong, they'll tell you. But sometimes they'll hear it and go, yeah, I'm not feeling heard. So then you move into, how can we change that? What do you think we could do to help that principal really hear what you're trying to say or understand? Who else can help you with this problem at school? You definitely are looking for ways to also connect them to other supports within the community, within their community. So that could be school. If they're in the court, sometimes it's a mentor, probation staff, family members, aunts, uncles, things like that. The summarizing, I like that one as well, and affirming, obviously. Summarizing is just a way to check in that you're hearing them the right way, and you just lead it with, so what I hear you saying is, and you paraphrase back to them, and it's another good check-in to make sure you're really hearing them. And it keeps you accountable to make sure you're actually listening to them, and not just having it come in and in your head already going, yeah, but you have your comebacks because you know. So it's a good way to keep you in check and make sure you're really listening to what they're saying. And then obviously affirming things. You want to look for times that they use the skills that you guys are working on, or used a strategy to stay out of trouble, or made a good choice and came home early, or turned down skipping school or whatever was going on. Always make sure to affirm that. That's what's going to build that esteem. That's going to help them turn it down again the next time. They'll feel empowered by that. The what to avoid section is also a good one, and I've touched on some of it. The question and answer routine, that's the yes, no kind of thing. Did you skip school? Did you use drugs? Did you? If you kind of run through all of that, if you get in that routine, they're shutting down. They'll maybe answer your questions, but they're not really going to give you, sometimes they'll even just fall into giving you what you want to hear, because they want to get the conversation over with. Confrontation, denial, that's not going to get anywhere, because again, they'll just deny and they did it, and then you get more frustrated and it escalates. The power struggles you definitely want to try to avoid. The expert trap, they know that you know, and they're over it. They're already checking in with their friends about it, and they've already become experts. A lot of teens, they kind of just think, oh, you're old, you don't know, and they just disregard what you have to say. So try not to be the expert. And realistically, if you think about it from their perspective, things do change. Times are changing rapidly with teenagers, and they're facing a lot more pressures and stress out there. So you do want to be curious about that and try to understand maybe what you were feeling as pressure and stress as a teen is a whole different ballgame for them right now. MySpace is a great example of that. The pressures and the bullying that goes on over the internet, none of us had to deal with. And it's a whole different level of stress. The blaming, try to avoid any concern for who's to blame, because it's not particularly relevant, honestly. You pick the person who's to blame, and then how do you move forward from there? That's the part that you want to focus on, is the moving forward piece of it. And sometimes it's easy in conflict situations to just get stuck on, but I want you to say that you were wrong. Well, once you hear them say they're wrong, does that solve the problem? No. So try to let go of that and just figure out, how do we move forward from here? How do we understand what each other is feeling and thinking about this? Where do we want to go with this together so we can stay in our relationship and not be harmful? The preaching, that ties into expert. And then the referral piece, there are resources within the community, and there sometimes are times where you feel like you might need to access services just to help. There's family mediation programs that can do a one-time mediation or ongoing, and there's some other community service in-home counseling as well. It's a little bit different than the mediation process. Mediation process has more to do with just helping everybody hear each other around the problem and coming up with a solution and compromising and things like that. Counseling is a more long-term, systemic look at what's going on and trying to change behavior through that way. But those can be accessed if they need to be. So I went way faster than I expected. Last year I had a partner that helped me. Does anybody have any questions or, excuse me, feedback about the information? You might be.
She has a question.
Oh.
I was waiting to get to it.
Oh, no, no,
No, that's okay.
I think that a couple things come to mind in hearing your story, because it's not the first time I've heard that. I have my own dark secrets that as my kids get older, I'm not going to share. You don't have to go into detail. A lot of times we call it like war story, because they'll hear it and they'll maybe pick out the glorifying parts of it. Certainly, it's okay, I think, to communicate you had some rough times. I would focus more on what got you out of it, and maybe take some time yourself to look at, were there people in your life that helped you and supported you, and what did they do for you that helped you, and then try to transfer that into dealing with your own son and communicating in that way. You have credibility already. Your mom, you are the biggest influence in your kid's life. So you don't have to share it in the detail, because is that what you're worried about? Like, you need him to understand how scary it was?
I try to do that. I try to tell him positive things, like he's helped me and being support me, and having people that I actually turn to outside of it. But and those things without actually telling them what I did.
Right.
But I know when you need to tell them what you did. You need to tell them exactly what you did so that he can learn.
That was the other piece I wanted to, the other end of this for me when you were telling the story was that there are going to be some of those things he is going to have to learn for himself. And I'm not saying, it sounds like a lot of it was extreme, but maybe let yourself go a little bit about some of that and use the decisional balance and the choice theme. And you can easily talk with him about, because you know directly, like, if you chose to do this, what do you think would happen? If you chose to do that, what do you think would happen? And help him explore and arrive to that positive, pro-social choice. Because you have so much to bring to the table, so much more experience, you're going to be able to have a pretty meaningful conversation with him about that. And he's going to respond to it as long as you're letting him kind of take the lead about problem solving it and just supporting him as he's kind of saying to you what he's heard. Somebody told me this, somebody told me that, things like that. Does that make sense? There is going to be anxiety.
Let me add a little bit to that, because my son's 18 now, and the war stories. I try really not to tell war stories, but I have, and I do on occasion, have shared some of my experiences, but I'm very selective. I don't get into stuff that was like another level, because I'm not that person anymore. And I had to learn over the years as I was getting older that stuff, I was never proud of it, but whatever caused me to get into it, I got into it. So I try to explain to him right off the bat, I see what you're going through, I see what maybe you may be faced with, sex, drugs, alcohol, those kinds of things. And when we want to have real deep conversations about that, because I know that's what he's seen, then I'll share a little bit of stuff with him. So that for credibility purposes, I guess, so to speak, just a little bit. So that he's not thinking, oh, Dad, you're just talking off the wall, Dad. You know, you read some book or you went and did some video, you know, whatever, Dad. But when I can actually, because I'm involved with kids a lot, that's why I say you have to be involved with your kids. And you have to be involved in their lives so you can kind of see what's going on in their world. Because it is a lot of what we went through when we were young. The drinking, the drugging, I mean, how much of that was in our neighborhoods when we were growing up? We saw it in our society at our time. Might have been a little different. And each area, each person went through it their own way. I've had to be real cautious with it. You know, he's in college. We had long conversations about him going to college, long conversations about what to watch out for, long conversations about sex and what he needs to be paying attention to when he's getting involved with the young ladies, when alcohol and drugs involved, with sex and all the things that come with it and all the bad decisions and choices. And because I'm around it enough, I can give him real examples. And when you can give him real examples, that really hits home. Because in the other half of that, what have you done to set that up? Remember I said, when you're having a relationship with your kid, what is it that you're doing that's setting up for those types of conversations to take place? Because he's 12, you already know what types of conversations you're going to have with him. How are you setting that up to make it comfortable? To make it know that my mom's here, you know, in the good and the bad. You know, my mom will understand if I make a bad choice. You know, my mom, I could probably go to my mom before I even make it. Or it's funny to hear the guy say a while ago, you're kind of sitting there and your parents are there, but they're not there. Because my son will say it, he goes, Dad, I'm about to do something. Man, I just see your face, and I'm like, man, I ain't doing that. My kids that I deal with back home, my gang kids, a lot of them would tell me, Vic, I was about to go do something wrong, and I just keep remembering what you said in that presentation, or I remember what you said when you visited me at school, or when you were talking to my PO was mad at me, and you were in the middle trying to sort out everything. You really made me see what I was doing wrong. Sometimes you got to let them see what's going on and use your experiences to paint the picture. So then the picture, they watch it, they're not dumb. They get it. And they have friends, and they hear and they see. Sometimes we have to be the facilitator to paint the picture. We're the painter. And we kind of give that future, what it could be like. And sometimes using your personal experience, even though they may not know that's what it is going to help you make real good setting for conversation and exploration of decision making and choices and the types of things to solve some problems that they're going to run across. It's amazing how it goes, because I use it to my advantage with my gang kids and my own kids. I use it to my advantage. I found a real good way to use it to my advantage, all the bad stuff that I did. I'm not going to pump it up. Really not. Yes, ma'am.
Well, one way you can preface it is to say, I know somebody who did this and here's what happened. And you don't have to say who that somebody was, if it's your personal experience.
My son is 12, I'm trying that, and he's like, who cares?
Yeah, sometimes it won't work that way. And as a teacher, kids ask us, you know, well, did you ever try marijuana? Did you do this, do that? And I'm like, well, you know, whatever I did should not influence you in your decision. Whatever I did or didn't do, you have to make your own decisions. So there's another way to handle it, because kids ask pretty pointed questions sometimes.
Yes, they do. I mean, I had a situation with my son, and I was going through this, and I was playing it out back. And I remember where I had to catch myself. My son had a car, I had a car, and I took care of it, paid it off. And my goal, give it to him when he leaves college. Let him drive it a little bit. He'll have his license and everything. Let him drive it his senior year on occasion. He's going to go to high school, college. Let him take the car, fix it up. You know, we fixed it up. I dropped it a little bit, put some rims. And he was, oh, Dad, my car, right? Well, I was scared. because insurance, number one, is probably going to go up. Number two, what if he wrecks it? Oh my God, what if he's drinking, he's driving? You know, what if he goes and picks up some little girl and they do something? I'm like, do I really need to let him have the car? So I had to test the water. A little bit at a time, conversations about it, going back and forth, back and forth. He wrecked it January 30th. January 30th. And all I heard was, I wrecked the car. And I was like, God darn it, Dick. I mean, I blew my top on the phone. I blew my top. And I said, it's 2 days later and you're just now telling me? He goes, well, Dad, because I knew you were going to get mad. You already had it, right? And I had to catch myself. And I had to say, look, I'm going to call you back about an hour or two. I need you to pick up the phone, all right? I said, are you okay? He goes, yeah, I'm good. I said, all right. So I hung up, and I had to get myself together. My girl was in the car, like, what is wrong with you? I said, because God dog it, I told him, take care of that car. I told him this, I told him that, and he didn't do it. I said, and she was like, well, you're the one that let him have it. And so I had to really go back and kind of do my own, because I'm thinking 18, right? And I had to go back when I was 18. I was driving at 15, and they weren't always legit cars, you know? So I had to really go back, and sometimes I had to catch myself, because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about motivational interventions and interviewing, and I wasn't thinking about not being mad. I had to really catch myself and change up and try some of these things that I learned a long time ago. But as parents, we don't always have the sheet with us, you know. So I had to really catch myself. We went over it, we worked it all out, and eventually took care of itself. But it was one of those things where I was really, really upset.
But I like what you said when you said, I'm not that same person. Now, my son hasn't seen that person because I changed my ways. And a lot of it. But I like to do now is try to lead by example how I am. And I told him when I was talking to him, he said, I'm not stupid, Mom. I'm not going to do those stupid things. And I said, you know what? I said, those hormones go on. I said, you're going to think you're the smartest person in the world, and you're going to look back and say, I did some stupid shit. I said, you're going to think you're smart.
If you're involved with him, you're going to know where he's going. Your parental instincts is going to tell you when to kick in. And when you kick in, don't do what I did 2-3 months ago. You got to really have your emotions in check. I had to go back to the officer when he was talking about, if you're going to call my sergeant not crazy, he's probably not crazy with you. You know, you have to go back and you have to not allow your emotions to get in the middle of it. You have to keep it professional, so to speak, under control, and you got to give it time to work. Because sometimes as parents, we're quick to say, hey, tell me what's going on. We give them that, what happened? And what do the kids do? I don't know. You always ask that question, what happened? I don't know. You know they know, but they don't want to tell you, right? Because they want to see what your reaction is going to be. Throw them the curveball and ask these open-ended questions. Explain to me what was happening at the school today. Because what I heard was that it was this, that, and the other. No, Mom. Okay, well, explain to me what happened. Instead of, explain to me what happened and me digas ahorita. You tell me right now, I want to know now. Tell me now. And what do? And there goes my mom again. Like crazy, man. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it takes me back to, how have you set up your relationships to have these problem-solving incidents, these communication conversations with your kids? How have you set that up from the time they were small up to now? If they weren't set up, what can you do to continuously set them up and be consistent? I mentioned earlier we had rules in my house. I'm going through these things, and I have to remember with the girls, I could pass by all kinds of toys and not even care. And I'll go start picking it up and putting it away where it needs to go. And I'm sitting there like, why did you do all that? And why did you have almost 30-minute conversation with the girls about reviewing all the rules? And why is it that when you ask them, they know? And then how come when you ask them and they know, you, the parent, don't tell them to go do it? or to remember to go do it. So I have to get into that routine with the girls. I have to get in the routine. And I said, boy, I see a mess on the floor. I wonder what rule number 7 says. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. We gotta fix it, we gotta fix it. Because if not, we're gonna get a consequence. So they start to, after a while, like the young man downstairs said, sometimes you gotta let them hit brick walls. You gotta let them hit brick walls sometimes. But if you are experienced from your past, you're gonna know the brick wall when it's coming. You're gonna see it, I guarantee you. And you're gonna be able to do what you know you need to do. It's just, what is that communication like so that he continues to hear you? And then, are you gonna be there in the good and in the bad?
I think another thought too, when he says things to like, I'm not going to do that, I already know, ask him back, well, tell me what's your plan. Find out from him what his plan is, and that'll give you some insight on, okay, he's got it covered for this year. Next year we might have to revisit it, but that'll give you a better sense too, where he's just dismissing you in that like, oh, quit, okay, I heard it, I'm not going to do it, because he's just done with the conversation. But flip it back on him and ask him, what's your plan then? How are you going to handle it? Sounds like you got it covered. Tell me how you're going to handle it. Share that with me. And that can also, as he's describing his plan, create some opportunities because of your past experience to see some red flags or plant some additional seeds to give him the skills and tools so when he's in that situation, he's going to make the right choice. So that's another way to just keep that feedback so that you can be reassured that he does have a plan, he is covered.
I also think it's good to remind ourselves as parents and guardians that as kids aren't perfect, we're not either. So if we blow our stack or get upset, for us to be able to go back and say, I acted badly and make it right, because what we really want our kids to do is to hopefully make right choices in the first place, but if they don't, how do you fix it? And that's how we can model that. Saying, I'm sorry I messed up. And I think that's a really good gift to give, and that's not something I really learned very well.
I agree, totally agree. Me being the macho guy that I can be, and growing up the way I did, to say sorry, I don't think so. But I've had to learn over the years, gotta back up, man, you messed that all up. You screwed it all up. You do it real good with the gang member, but you screwed it all up at the house. I had to really go back and really look at, again, it's doing that self-exploration. You got to really look at yourself and where you're at. And sometimes we have to say, we're not perfect, we don't get it right. And then I have to go back and remember, well, who was my role model for parenting? I really didn't, I had a bunch of them, but I can't remember any of them because I had so many, you know? But I remember my coaches because I was with them a lot. So I remember those guys because they were all, I seemed to always be around that, you know, because I was an athlete. But with my mom, I can't really remember a lot of chores or conversations with my mom. My mom worked. Love her to death. She's still working. In her 60s, still cutting hair. Still working. But I don't ever remember those moments where we were hugging and mijo, sit with me and let's talk. I just know that they got divorced and it was ugly and my mom would go out and I'd be at home by myself with my sister and I'm wondering, why am I here? I'm 10 years old, I'm 11 years old. Why is it 1 in the morning? And what am I supposed to do with my sister? What happens if somebody breaks in? Oh, somebody just shot outside, or they're fighting upstairs in the apartments. I mean, you know, as a youngster, I had to go back and really sort out, well, who were my parenting role models? So I made it a point when I had my son that because I was scared, I would go to a conference and I would go to a parenting class or a family class. I got involved in alcohol and drug counseling. That was kind of what brought me to where I got at, where I was at today. I learned a lot about why I did some of the things I did and how family dynamics and certain things that happened to me caused me to move in that direction. I learned a lot about myself and I learned how to be a better parent. And some of it you can read and get and implement. Some of it you're going to learn on the job. Some of it you're just going to learn on the job. That's just the way it is. But keeping your emotions in check and really, really sorting it out is the way I stay sane. Because I could lose my head real quick as a parent because protector comes out really, really fast, especially with my girls. You know, especially with my girls. Questions? No questions? I'm interested. How do you gentlemen deal with your daughters? How do you deal with your daughters? What are some things that we do different with girls that we don't do with boys? Anybody as a parent?
You know what, I'm seeing it from my stepdaughter and only child. Around her desk, and she has allergies. Sometimes I don't know if they're
Real allergies or not? Yes. Yes.
But she's 9 years old, and I can already see trouble that she has sickly. She's 12, 13 years old. He's going to try to control her so tight that she's probably going to be wild outside the house.
So let me ask, how do you avoid that? If you see that coming, how can you and your spouse maybe work on that together to prevent that from happening?
Well, I thought we need to talk to her. We need to just be open and give her some room, but let her know where you're coming from. And like, oh, she's not going out now. She'll have to wait until she's 30 to have a date. Yeah.
That's just what we do.
But
That's just what we do.
It's just a special bond, I think, between just like boys and their mom
Yes.
and girls and their dad. I mean, that's just the way it is.
I have two, 7, and then my fiance daughter is 10. And never had a male in the mix at all. She had her, was never married, anything. My daughter lives with her mother. My son came with me when we got divorced about 4 years ago. And my daughter would love to come, but state law, kind of Texas stuff drives me nuts. But anyway, my little one, yeah, she tries. Daddy, Dad, like, what's up, Mom? What's up, chiquis? I call her chiquis, the chiquita, she's little bitty. It's a Spanish word for small, or little bitty. And when we're talking about certain things, she has a real bad habit of lying. She just lies through her teeth. And I have to really call her on it. And then with who's going to be my stepdaughter, I call her my daughter, she very laid back, very timid. Her mom really like, let's talk and lay down, talks to her. And I'm not like that. I'm like, hey, come here. What are you doing over there? Sit down. What are you doing? Well, Dad is, and we'll have a conversation. But I'm not all up, come sit in Daddy's lap and let's talk. That's just not me. But I've had to learn, because, man, girls are just like, oh, emotions. Jesus, I thought I'm sitting there talking, like, why are you crying? I didn't yell at you. What's wrong? And it's, disappointment. And sometimes it's maybe my facial expression or my body language, or I might have leaned over too much. And my stepdaughter, Mia, she says, are you mad at me? I'm like, no, I'm not mad at you. Why? Well, it sounded like you're mad at me because the way you said it. I said, well, what do you mean the way I said it? She says, well, you just sounded like you were mad. Are you mad? I'm like, no, I'm okay. Okay, and then she's back to her own self and she takes off and she goes. With my little one, because my little one's much more social than the bigger one, they're 3 years apart, but my little one's very social. But at her mother's and on that side of the family, her boundaries get tested a lot. There's a lot of things she tests over there quite a bit. But when she comes to our house, I have to really counter. I have to find a way to talk to her. And that takes a little bit of time because I'll have her, if it's my weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I take her back on Sunday. I've had to really have those conversations. And just with my fiance, I've had to have conversations on how are we going to deal with her daughter. Because that's how it's been. In the beginning, it's been her daughter and my kids. And having to find a way together how we're going to work that process out. And it's gone well. It was hard at first, but it's gone real well to the point where the little girl now calls me Dad. And that just happened. My kids freaked out. Like, you said what? You called him Dad. I mean, but it's taken a little while to have that relationship. And I had to really learn as a father, as a male, that I had to learn that I had to really understand the emotional side of the girls because it was hard for me.
Do they go to the mom and ask her when they don't get their way to you?
They try, but again, as parents, this is where we have to be on the same page. So, sometimes it's easy, go ask your mom. And then, well, mom said, and then mom said, okay, and then let me hurry up and leave because Dad was giving me a hard time. So I'm not even gonna go back to him. And then she shoots off, or he shoots off, and then an hour later goes by. Oh yeah, where'd she go? Oh, I let her go to the mall. She said you said it was okay. I didn't tell her it was okay. And then what's happening? The spouses are fighting and upset, and she's at the mall, muy mona. She's having a good time. I'm at the mall, and nobody knows. I think it takes us back to the whole spouse and how, whether it's the biological parents or it's a step parent, however it goes, communication is huge. And agreeing to agree on these standards and the boundaries and the limits and how you're going to handle those situations, I think is very, very important. Very important.
I agree. I think I see that a lot when at work. I would have families come in where they were blended, and by the time when they hit the teen years, and if they're acting out, they're very good at figuring out how to triangulate things, because then it deflects from what they're doing. So they'll split the parents up, like 101. That's one of the first things they do, because then the parents are fighting and they're mad at each other and they're not paying attention to what Johnny's doing over here. So it's strategy number one. You definitely want to be on the same page. Have some definite things that you guys know you agree on, so that if you are approached alone, you know what the family stance is. It helps negate a lot of that. They're very vigilant and smart, and they figure ways around stuff to get to do what they want to do, and you got to be on your toes.
and learn from each other as spouses. Maybe there's a weakness that you have that you could get from your husband, and your husband from the wife. I've had to learn now with her, just with her, because of what she's accustomed to, is I've had to learn to lay with her and say, hey, are you all right? I'm okay. I'm sorry if I felt you sounded like I was being a little rough with you, but that really kind of bothers me when you're talking to back to your mom like that. I said, I don't like that. Don't talk back to your mom like that. I think there's other ways to be able to do that. What do you think's a better way? And then she starts, and they know. They know. And so part of developing the relationship with me and her, I've had to spend time with her. She's a musician. She plays violin. I've had to learn a little bit more about that. The girls are in ballet now. I mean, I'm soccer, basketball, baseball, and now ballet. And so I'm there at the ballet recitals, and I'm going, and macho guy with flowers, about to give it to him. And, I've had to give in some. I've had to see another side. I've had to learn. And it's great, because I think they really appreciate that on both sides. And it's the same way with the boys and the moms. Sometimes we coddle the boys too much, to the point where we don't allow them to learn how to cook, or learn how to clean, or learn how to iron, or learn how to mop, or clean a toilet, or do a tub. My son learned it before he left, and he went to school and was like, I'm glad I learned, because there's people that don't clean, man, they're dirty, Dad. I'm like, and he comes home and he cleans at home now. Before, I used to have to ask him, hey, what's up? What's the deal? And now he kind of does it on his own. So it's all how we set that thing up, I think. It's very, very crucial, very key. Any other questions? I think we're pretty much out of time.
You actually do have a couple minutes. So I'm sorry, I was wrong. You have 1:35. So we're going to have more questions.
About 5 more minutes. Any other questions or comments?
У меня вопрос. Не кажется ли, что проблема наших детей – это проблема родителей? В том, что мы говорим, что проблема детей – это проблема родителей. То есть не нужно ли сперва смотреть проблему родителей, потому что дети повторяют то, что делают родители.
Don't you think that the children, the problems of our children are our own problems, the adults' problems, and maybe first you need to fix some things with adults because the kids would repeat what their parents do?
Yeah, I think I like the point he made earlier about understanding what your own stuff is in it when you're frustrated and angry and there's lots of conflict. Try to figure out what's triggering you in that. Certainly there's patterns, behavior patterns, conflict, the yelling. I come from a family of yellers. My husband's doesn't. So I'm one of those that can say stop yelling, and I'm responding back, I'm not yelling at the top of my lungs, I'm just feeling very strongly. So there's definitely patterns, and it's all about that modeling. You do have to pay attention to the fact that even when they turn into, they're teenagers and they're moving away from you into the world and their peers become a big influence and things like that, they're still paying attention to you. Their foundation is what and their relationships and how they relate to people are grounded in how they relate with their parents. So certainly figuring out if there's patterns going on that aren't helping and you have control over that, certainly try to work on those issues and understand that you can only control your own behavior, not theirs, and then work on changing yours, because they'll respond to that eventually, especially because they're just watching and learning.
Very, very, very true. I agree totally that the person has to work on what's going on with them, because taking it back, I come from a family of drinkers, a lot of alcohol, and from the role modeling, I was going into that same mode. I was right there with my dad. We were going out, no big deal. Going to the clubs, drinking like we were just friends. When really that probably was not probably the best thing, but it was kind of the only thing you kind of know as you're coming up in the neighborhood, in my situation. And it was my way to bond with my dad. It was my way to kind of be with my dad. And I don't think he did it intentionally and said, I'm going to turn my son into a drunk. I don't think that's what it was. I just think that that's just what was going on at that time. And I fell into it. But I had to learn that when I got older, I didn't like what was coming with it. I didn't like the after effects. I didn't like the trouble you could get into. I didn't like how I would be so tired after a while, how it was hindering my skills as an athlete, what the alcohol did. So I had to learn a lot about that so that I wouldn't repeat those same actions with my own son. We don't have beer in the house. I have alcohol in the house. I haven't drank in 3 years. Even before that, I drank once or twice a year. At a special occasion, I had to really change what it was I was going to do so that I wouldn't even remotely think I was going to be responsible for teaching him how to be a drinker or a drug or somebody who used drugs, because I went that route too. So having to understand some of the reasons why I got involved with that, and then what was it going to take for me to get away from that, and role modeling was huge in how his reactions or his thoughts are about alcohol and drugs.
I have a question. You work with the gang kids. Do you ever go like maybe to their house, the family house, and see that their mom and dad are also having drug and alcohol? How do you handle that? And what do you tell those kids?
It's very carefully how I handle it. I've got to understand. The question is that have I ever dealing with some of the gang kids? Have I ever fell into a situation where the parents are using and drinking and that kind of stuff, and how do I handle that when I make a home visit? First of all, I need to understand who the family is. So before I even start trying to jump straight into the home visit, sometimes I try to set an appointment on a neutral ground, or maybe sometimes in our office, to kind of get the ball rolling and kind of get an idea of what's going on. And then I continuously talk to the kids. Sometimes they're going to tell you right up front, and sometimes they're embarrassed and they won't say anything. And so you got to wait till you develop that relationship before you start getting out there. Sometimes I make phone calls and talk to the parents on the phone, because they're one way on the phone, another way in person. And then after a little while, when you get real comfortable and they know you already and you come around, they don't have a problem saying, hey, Vic, you want a beer? Let's right here and talk over a beer. How's my son doing? Then I'm like, what do you mean? Why are you asking me? He's your son. That's what I'm saying to myself. But I'm having to sit there and really look at what's going on with that. And before I can even begin to talk about what's wrong with it to the kid or to the family, I have to establish a real good relationship with them before I can even have that talk. Because to them, that's very normal. And you're coming into my house, disrespecting me, telling me how to live? I don't think so. So I have to be real careful in how I'm addressing those things. That takes a little while. You can't just straight up say, well, your son drinks because of you. Look at you. I mean, your relationship with that family is toast. It's over.
I think that's another good point too, is don't assume that they think it's a problem. You might see it as a problem and you try to address the kid about, how is this for you? This must be horrible. And they're like, what are you talking about? You just insulted me, and they're not trusting you and they're shutting you off. So again, that's where a lot of that open-ended questions and exploring just for them, what are their stresses, what are their concerns, and trying to understand how they cope with it, because they clearly have developed some coping skills around it, some good, some bad, and you want to explore that with them and then help them prop up the good coping skills so that they can get through it, because no matter what, they're going to love that mom and dad. I work with kids like that bless their hearts, their parents are in jail, prison, drug and alcohol issues, and it doesn't matter.
You grow up liking it or you grow up hating it. And after a while, I just grew up hating it. And I just said to myself, I'm not putting my son through this. No way. But that was me, and those were choices I made. And when the worker came out of me, I had to be real careful because I was trying to help everybody. My friends, why you drinking? We ain't trying to hear all that. Sometimes you just got to be real careful with it, take your time, and make sure you get to know the family real well before you just start getting a little too personal. Stepping into that ground because you can shut the doors.
Thank you guys. Kelly gave us the time out, so thanks for hanging with me in the beginning there too.
This program is being provided by the 15 members of the Vancouver Educational Telecommunications Consortium, TV, etc.